Airports are usually loud, busy, and forgettable. But on that winter afternoon inside Chicago's O'Hare, the world seemed to stop. Michael Jordan had walked through countless terminals in his life, but never had he felt his knees weaken like this. Just a few feet away, his ex-wife Wanita appeared, pushing a stroller with two little boys, twins. And when Michael's eyes met theirs, his heart froze. The same eyes, the same smile, the same dimple he had seen in the mirror his entire life, staring back at him. It had begun like any other delay. He was waiting at gate B12, cap pulled low, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. A flight to Charlotte blinked red on the screen. Delayed. He hated waiting, but airports had long ago taught him patience. Strangers passed by, whispering his name, nudging one another. A little boy pointed with excitement, his father trying to hush him. Michael offered his practice smile, polite but distant. He wanted no attention today, and yet fate had other plans. The sound reached him first. A laugh, not loud, but sharp, slicing through the background noise of rolling suitcases and boarding calls. His chest tightened instantly. He knew that laugh. He had lived inside that laugh once. And when his eyes searched the crowd, they found her. Wanita. Years had passed since he had last seen her. She looked older, as did he, but her presence was unchanged, strong, steady, carrying the same quiet command that had once grounded his restless storms. For a moment, Michael felt the past rising up to meet him. The early days of love, the glitter of fame, the shadows that broke them apart. But then he saw it, the stroller she pushed before her. At first, it seemed ordinary, another mother guiding her children through the chaos of travel. But inside, two small boys sat bundled in coats, their round faces glowing with life. Twins. Their laughter bubbled, their voices carried across the terminal, their small hands waving toy airplanes in the air. And Michael Jordan felt his world tilt. Because when those boys smiled, he recognized the truth immediately. The curve of their lips, the spark in their eyes, the unmistakable dimple pressed deep into their cheeks. These were not strangers' children. They were his. Michael's phone slipped from his hand, clattering loudly on the floor. A nearby traveler bent to retrieve it, offering it back with a polite nod. Michael muttered a hoarse thanks, but his attention never left the boys. One of them wore a jersey, red, number 23. His number. Michael's chest tightened as if the air itself had been stolen away. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. All he could do was stare, as the crowd blurred and the noise faded to nothing. The restless twin pointed toward the tarmac. "Mommy, look, big plane." "That's right, baby," Wanita answered, her voice steady. And then the quieter boy chimed in, his words innocent yet shattering. "Daddy, plane goes zoom." Michael staggered. His legs threatened to give. His heart hammered so violently he thought the entire terminal could hear it. That word, "Daddy," echoed through him, tearing open wounds he didn't know he still carried. Wanita bent to search for something in her bag, and her eyes lifted. And then it happened. Their gazes collided. Her body froze. His breath stopped. For an instant, time folded back on itself. It was no longer O'Hare Airport. It was the years they had shared, the life they had built, the love that had crumbled, the silence that had stretched endlessly between them. But now there were two boys. Boys who looked like him. And Michael Jordan, the man who had never flinched on the court, sat frozen in the middle of a crowded airport, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to deny what he saw. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. Wanita's hands tightened on the stroller's handle, her knuckles pale. Michael sat forward on the edge of his seat, his body taut, caught between the urge to stand and the weight pinning him down. Years had passed, and yet in that instant, they were back inside the ruins of a marriage that once defined them both. She had been the anchor through the storm of his rising fame, the quiet strength when he crumbled under the world's expectations. And then she had been gone, leaving with silence where love once lived. He had thought he'd buried that chapter, but here she was, standing before him with two small mirrors of himself. One of the twins squirmed, restless, A plastic airplane slipped from his hand and rattled across the terminal floor, spinning until it tapped against Michael's shoe. The boy pointed, eyes wide. "Mommy! The tall man has my plane." Michael bent slowly, his large hands shaking as he picked it up. He held the tiny toy like it was made of glass, his throat dry, his chest heavy. He crouched low, his towering frame folding awkwardly before the stroller. The boy reached out, grabbing the plane from Michael's palm. For a heartbeat, their hands touched. Small fingers against calloused ones. Warmth against trembling strength. "Thank you," the child said softly. Michael's lips parted. "You're welcome, little man." His voice was hoarse, almost breaking. The boy stared at him longer than a stranger's child should. His dark eyes studied Michael's face, searching, comparing. Then he tilted his head, a faint smile forming. "You're tall. Like Daddy." The words tore through him. Michael's chest clenched, his breath stuttered. His eyes darted to Wanita. She stood rigid, her expression unreadable, but her eyes shimmered with unspoken weight. Michael forced his voice steady. "Where is your daddy?" The quieter twin answered without hesitation, his voice clear, innocent. "Daddy's in heaven." The phrase hit like a thunderclap. Michael's vision blurred. His mind reeled. The world spun and yet stood still all at once. "Daddy's in heaven." Wanita's head dipped low, her lips pressing tight, her shoulders heavy with the burden of truth. She did not look at him. She did not need to. He knew. Michael stumbled back, his body trembling. The man who had stared down entire arenas, who had silenced thousands with a single shot, now found himself undone by the quiet words of a child. The twins laughed suddenly, caught in a private joke, their voices high and pure, free from the storm hanging above. One leaned into the other, whispering with delight. They had no idea of the earthquake their presence had unleashed in the heart of the man kneeling before them. Michael's eyes burned. He blinked hard, refusing the tears, but they gathered anyway, pressing against the walls he had built inside himself for decades. Wanita finally lifted her gaze to meet his. It was not anger she carried in her eyes, nor was it forgiveness. It was something in between, tired, layered, complex. She gave a small shake of her head, subtle but firm. "Not here. Not now." An announcement echoed overhead. "Final boarding call for Flight 237 to Miami. Gate B12. The spell broke. Wanita adjusted the stroller straps, her movements brisk, precise. One of the boys tugged at her sleeve, eager, while the other turned once more to Michael, watching him with silent curiosity, as if trying to solve a mystery written across his face. Michael's mouth opened. No words came. His throat burned, his body frozen. And in that crowded terminal, under the harsh fluorescent lights of O'Hare, Michael Jordan, the man who had never frozen under pressure, who had never flinched at the weight of history, stood paralyzed. Not by defenders, not by the clock, but by two boys with his eyes, his smile, his very reflection staring back at him. The world moved on. The crowd bustled. The gate attendant repeated the call for boarding. But for Michael, nothing moved. Nothing mattered. Because in that moment, he knew. His past had just walked back into his life, carrying the future in a stroller. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. Wanita's love stories never begin the way you expect. For Michael Jordan and Wanita, it wasn't the glittering lights of an arena or the roar of a crowd that tied them together. It was something quieter, simpler, something ordinary that grew into extraordinary. He had met her long before the world crowned him a legend. Back then, he was just a young man with a burning hunger, chasing a ball across college courts, dreaming of making it to the league. And she was calm where he was restless, steady where he was storm. Michael would later say that Wanita carried the kind of presence that made a room stop spinning, the kind of presence he didn't even know he needed until he found himself leaning on it. Their love was not explosive at first. It was built brick by brick. Dinners at small restaurants where nobody knew his name, late-night drives through North Carolina roads with the windows rolled down, conversations that stretched until sunrise. She saw him not as the player, not as the star in the making, but as the man beneath the ambition, the man still trying to figure out who he was. By the time the Chicago Bulls drafted him, their bond had already begun to harden into something permanent. Fame arrived like a storm, bright, sudden, overwhelming. The city embraced him, the league feared him, and the world learned his name. But in those first years, when the lights burned too hot, Wanita was the shade he sought. When the noise grew deafening, hers was the voice that cut through, calm and grounding. Michael remembered their wedding, the day it all became official. It wasn't the grandest affair by celebrity standards, but to him it was everything. He remembered the way she smiled walking down the aisle, the way her hand trembled in his, the way he felt like he had found home. And then came family, their first child. Michael holding the tiny bundle of life in his arms, staring down in disbelief that something so perfect could come from him. The sleepless nights, the laughter echoing through their home, the soft chaos of diapers and toys. He reveled in it all. He wasn't just the man chasing championships. He was a husband, a father, a man who came home to love. But life, especially a life lived under relentless spotlight, is never simple. The cracks began quietly, almost invisibly at first. It started with absence. Road games that stretched into weeks. Off-seasons filled with commitments, appearances, endorsements. Michael told himself he was doing it for them, for the family, for security, for the life they deserved. But the more he gave to the game, the less of himself was left to give at home. Wanita never complained in those early years. She understood his drive. She admired it even, but admiration slowly gave way to exhaustion. Nights waiting alone, birthdays missed, anniversaries overshadowed by playoff runs. He remembered her eyes on those rare evenings when he did make it home. Grateful he was there, but carrying a quiet sadness she never put into words. Then came the rumors, the tabloids, the whispers that chased him from city to city. Michael told himself it was the price of fame, that none of it mattered because he knew the truth. But to Wanita it wasn't just gossip. It was erosion, a steady dripping of doubt that wore away at trust. Arguments grew sharper. Silences lasted longer. He would come home to find the air thick with unspoken words, the children shuffling quietly in the background, aware of the storm even if they couldn't name it. Michael often escaped to the court because there at least things made sense. The ball, the rim, the scoreboard, they didn't lie, they didn't accuse. On the hardwood, he could be invincible. At home, he was only human, and he didn't always know how to be that man. But even in the midst of the unraveling, there were moments, small, tender flashes, that reminded him of what they had built. Wanita's hand on his shoulder after a crushing loss. Her laughter breaking through when the children did something silly. A quiet night, rare but treasured, when they sat on the porch and said nothing at all, just breathing in the same air, remembering silently why they had chosen each other in the first place. It was those memories that stayed with Michael as he sat frozen in O'Hare, staring at the twins in the stroller. Because even as life had pulled them apart, even as distance and bitterness had replaced closeness and joy, the truth was undeniable. Once upon a time, he had loved this woman with everything he had, and she had loved him too. Now, standing before him years later, pushing children who carried his very reflection, Michael realized something he had tried to bury for too long. No matter how far you run from the past, it always has a way of finding you. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. The unraveling of love is never sudden. It is not a single argument, not a single betrayal, not one day when everything collapses at once. No, it is slower, quieter, like water wearing away stone. And that was how Michael and Wanita's story shifted from promise to pain. At first, the arguments were small. Forgotten phone calls, missed dinners, broken promises to be home at a certain hour. Michael told himself it was nothing. He was providing, building a legacy, ensuring his children would never know struggle. But every missed night was a wound that left its mark. And Wanita, though she tried to hide it, carried those marks in her eyes. Then the silences grew. He would return from a road trip, exhausted and triumphant, and find her distant. She smiled less, laughed less. Their conversations became functional, about bills, about schedules, about the children. The warmth that had once filled their home cooled into something harder. The public never saw this side of him. To the world, he was unstoppable, the hero of Chicago, the man who could not lose. But behind closed doors, he often felt like he was losing the most important battle of all. There were nights when he tried. When he brought home gifts, tried to rekindle laughter, promised he would do better. And for a time, those moments worked. A spark would return to her eyes, a softness in her voice. But the demands of his world never loosened their grip. Another season, another championship run, another distraction. And soon the cycle repeated. Wanita carried more than just her own pain. She carried the weight of raising children mostly alone while the world belonged to him. She carried the whispers of rumors, the tabloids that printed names and faces, the shadows of doubt that no reassurance could ever fully erase. And though she rarely shouted, rarely accused, her silence was its own verdict. Michael would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet distance between them. He could silence crowds of thousands, but he could not silence the emptiness that had grown inside their marriage. He remembered the breaking point. Not one explosive moment, but a series of days that blurred into inevitability. Papers filed. Lawyers speaking the words neither of them wanted to say aloud. The children caught in the middle, too young to understand why their home was no longer whole. The divorce was brutal, not just for the headlines it generated, but for what it took from them both. Years of love reduced to numbers on a settlement. Promises reduced to signatures on paper. And yet, beneath the bitterness, there was sorrow. Deep, unspoken sorrow that both carried but neither could show. Michael buried himself in the game. If he could not win at love, he would at least win at basketball. And so he did. He piled up championships, trophies, records. The world called him the greatest. But even in the glow of victory, even as confetti rained down and the city roared his name, he felt the absence. The one person who had once stood at his side, who had once steadied his storms, was gone. And now, all these years later, standing in an airport terminal, he was forced to confront the truth. That loss had never left him. It had only been waiting, because love does not truly disappear. It lingers in fragments, in memories of laughter, in the sound of a familiar voice, in the shape of children who carry the same eyes, the same smile. As Michael stared at Wanita, pushing the stroller with the twins, the past came flooding back. The good, the bad, the unforgettable. The nights of joy, the fights that tore them apart, the silence of divorce. And yet, despite everything, he felt the same truth he had felt the first time he looked into her eyes all those years ago. He still cared. Maybe he always had. The crowd pressed on around them. The boarding calls echoed once more. And Michael, frozen in time, realized that the story he thought was finished had just begun a new chapter. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. Michael leaned back in his chair, but his eyes never left the stroller. His mind, usually so sharp, felt clouded, heavy. He had been through championships, retirements, comebacks, even the crushing weight of grief when his father was taken from him. Yet nothing had prepared him for this. The boys didn't notice his turmoil. To them, he was just a tall stranger who happened to be kind enough to return a toy airplane. Their world was still small, innocent, untouched by the scars of adult choices. And maybe that was what tore at him most, the purity in their eyes, a purity he felt unworthy of. The louder twin piped up again, tugging at Wanita's sleeve. "Mommy, can he come with us? Please? He looks fun." Wanita froze, her face tightening, but the child persisted, pointing at Michael with a grin. "He can play airplanes with us on the plane." Michael's throat ached. He wanted to say yes, wanted to kneel down and promise he'd play airplanes with them every day for the rest of their lives. But the words wouldn't come. He had no right. Not yet. The quieter twin turned toward him, studying him with that unsettling focus again. "Do you like basketball?" he asked softly. The question nearly broke him. Michael swallowed. "Yeah, I do. Played it a little, back in the day." The boy smiled. "Me too." Mommy says I'm fast like Daddy was. Juanita's head snapped toward him, eyes flashing with warning, but the damage was done. Michael's chest constricted, his heart hammering. Fast like Daddy. Pictures of Daddy. Words spoken with such innocence, yet each one pulling him deeper into a truth he was terrified to accept. Wanita tried to distract them, fumbling in her bag for snacks. She handed each boy a small pack of crackers, her hands trembling slightly as she tore them open. The twins, easily swayed, forgot their questions for a moment, happily munching. Michael watched, silent, torn between anger and longing. Anger at the years stolen from him, longing for the years he might still have. What had she told them? Who did they think he was? Did they know the truth, or just fragments of a story crafted to protect them? He wanted to demand answers, to stand, to confront her, to shout over the noise of the airport that he deserved to know. But one look at the twins stopped him. Their small faces, innocent and unguarded, were not ready for the weight of adult truths. The boarding call came again, louder this time. Final call for Flight 237 to Miami, Gate B12. Juanita's breath hitched. She adjusted the stroller straps again, preparing to move. The twins wiggled with excitement, chattering about flying through the clouds. Michael panicked. Time was slipping through his fingers. If she walked away now, if she boarded that flight, what then? Would he ever see them again? His hand trembled as he reached out, touching the stroller's handle lightly. Wanita froze, her eyes darting to his. For a moment, the noise of the terminal disappeared again. It was just them, two people who had once shared everything, now locked in a silent standoff. "Wanita," he whispered, his voice raw. "Are they mine?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes shimmered, torn between truth and fear. She glanced at the twins, then back at him. The louder twin tugged at her sleeve again, oblivious. "Mommy, hurry! The plane's going to leave without us." The moment shattered. Wanita tightened her grip on the stroller and began to move toward the gate. Michael's chest burned. He wanted to stop her, to demand an answer, to tear down the wall of silence between them. But his legs refused to move. He stood there, rooted to the floor, as the woman he once loved and the twins who bore his face disappeared slowly into the stream of passengers. The last thing he saw was the quieter twin turning back one more time. Their eyes met. The boy gave a small, almost knowing smile, before vanishing into the crowd. And Michael Jordan, the man who had faced down the fiercest competition in the world without blinking, felt tears slide down his face in the middle of O'Hare International Airport. Because in that moment, he didn't know whether he had just glimpsed strangers or his sons. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. Wanita's airports are built for movement, for people rushing forward, for flights that never wait. But as Michael Jordan stood frozen near Gate B12, the world refused to move without him. He had let her walk away once, years ago. He could not do it again. His legs finally obeyed. He pushed past travelers, ignoring the startled looks, ignoring the whispers that followed his name. He moved with the urgency of a man who had just glimpsed the edge of his life and realized half of it was missing. "Wanita!" His voice cut across the terminal. She stopped. Slowly, she turned, her face unreadable, her hand still steady on the stroller's handle. The twins bounced impatiently, unaware of the storm brewing above them. Michael reached her, breath unsteady, heart pounding. For a moment, he simply stared at her, at the woman he had once called his wife, at the boys who could not possibly be strangers. "Are they mine?" he demanded, his voice low, trembling with the weight of years unspoken. Wanita's lips tightened. "Not here," she said softly but firmly. Michael shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. "Not here? Wanita, I just looked into their faces. I've been staring at myself since the second I saw them. Don't tell me not here. I've lived with enough silence already." Her shoulders rose, then fell. She glanced at the twins, whose attention had already shifted to the airplanes outside the window. Their innocence was both a shield and a burden. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then make me..." Michael shot back. You owe me that much. Wanita's eyes flickered with pain. I don't owe you anything. The words sliced deeper than he expected. For years, he had lived with the shadow of their failed marriage, blaming himself, blaming her, blaming the world. But hearing her say it outright, that she owed him nothing, stripped him raw. His voice cracked. Wanita, I missed their first steps, their first words. Birthdays, holidays, years I'll never get back. If they're mine, you stole them from me. Her eyes blazed suddenly, fire breaking through her calm. Stole them? Michael, do you even remember what it was like? Do you remember the nights I begged you to be home? The times I asked for you to show up for your family instead of your fame? You were gone long before I was. You think I wanted to raise them without you? The force of her words hit him like a punch. He staggered back slightly, caught between fury and guilt. You should have told me, he whispered, his voice hoarse. And what then? She countered, her voice shaking now. So you could fly in and out of their lives between games? So they could grow up knowing their father only as a shadow on television. A man who showed up when it was convenient? I chose to protect them. Michael's hands trembled. Protect them from me? Protect them from pain, she said, softer now, tears welling in her eyes. From the same pain I lived with every day. For a moment, silence pressed between them, heavy and suffocating. The twins, oblivious, played with their crackers, laughing at something only they understood. Michael's chest heaved. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to erase me. Wanita's gaze softened, but her voice was steady. I didn't erase you, Michael. I tried to give them a life without disappointment, without wondering why Daddy wasn't there, without waiting by the door for a man who never showed up. The words shattered him, because deep down he knew she was right. He had missed birthdays. He had missed dinners. He had been swallowed by the game, by the fame, by his own relentless hunger. He had always promised there would be time later, but later had come and gone. And now here they were. Michael dropped his gaze, his voice breaking. They deserved to know the truth. Wanita studied him for a long moment. Her jaw tightened, her eyes glistening. Then quietly she said, Maybe, but the truth is heavier than you realize. The boarding call came once more, final and firm. Wanita straightened, pushing the stroller a few steps forward. Michael's hand shot out, gripping the handle. Don't get on that plane, he whispered, desperation in every syllable. Not until you tell me. Wanita's eyes locked on his, full of conflict, full of history. For a long, breathless moment, the world around them blurred into nothing. And then softly, almost too softly to hear, she said, Yes. Michael's heart stopped. His grip tightened. His breath caught. Yes, she repeated, her voice breaking now. They're yours. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. For a moment, Michael could not breathe. The noise of the terminal, the calls for boarding, the hum of rolling suitcases, all of it faded into silence. All he heard were her words. They're yours. His legs wobbled, as though the floor beneath him had given way. He had faced the pressure of championships, of last-second shots with the weight of the world on his shoulders, but never had he felt this fragile, this undone. They're mine, he whispered, the words tasting strange, almost unreal. He looked past Wanita, at the boys still busy with their snacks, oblivious to the earthquake their mother had unleashed. Wanita, why didn't you tell me? Her lips trembled. Because you weren't ready. Michael's voice cracked. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to take away my children because you thought I wasn't ready. Her eyes flashed with pain. Michael, you were barely holding yourself together back then. You were drowning in fame, in pressure, in temptations. I was already losing you piece by piece. Do you think 2 babies would have saved us? Or destroyed us faster? The truth stung because he knew there was merit in her words. His life back then had been chaos. Every headline, every city, every late night on the road. But still, they deserved a father, he whispered. Wanita's eyes filled, her voice breaking. And they had one. Maybe not in the way you imagine, but they had love. They had safety. They had me. I gave them everything I could. Michael's hands shook as he ran them over his face. And I could have given them me. His voice cracked, heavy with regret. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not always, but could have tried. I deserved that chance. Wanita's shoulders sagged, her defenses softening. For the first time, she allowed herself to look directly at him. Not the legend, not the icon, but the man she had once loved, the man she had once chosen. I was angry, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Angry at you, angry at the life we lived. When I found out I was carrying them, I promised myself they wouldn't grow up waiting for you to show up and break their hearts. I thought I was protecting them, but maybe I was protecting myself too. Michael's chest heaved. He wanted to scream, to shout, to curse the years lost. But instead, his voice fell soft, wounded. Do they know? Wanita shook her head. Not the truth. They know they had a daddy who loved them. A daddy who isn't here anymore. They know stories, but they don't know you. The words landed heavy. They don't know you. For a man whose face was known across continents, whose name echoed in arenas, the idea that his own flesh and blood didn't know him was unbearable. I want to, Michael said suddenly, firmly, the conviction surprising even himself. I want to know them, to be part of their lives. I can't make up for what I lost, but I won't lose another day. Wanita's eyes searched his, torn between fear and hope. And what happens when the season starts again? When the cameras call, when the world pulls at you like it always has? Do you walk away from them the way you walked away from us? Michael shook his head violently, his voice raw. No, not this time. I'm not the man I was. I've had everything the world could give me, Wanita, and none of it matters if I don't have this. He glanced at the twins, his voice breaking. If I don't have them. For the first time, Wanita's resolve cracked. Her lips trembled. Her eyes glistened. She turned her face slightly, as though ashamed of the tears threatening to fall. The twins, noticing the stillness between their parents, looked up. The louder one frowned. Mommy? Are you sad? Wanita blinked rapidly, forcing a smile. No, baby. Mommy's okay. But Michael wasn't. His hand gripped the stroller again, tighter this time. Please, he whispered. Don't take them from me again. Don't get on that plane. Give me a chance. The announcement echoed once more, sharp and final. Final boarding for Flight 237. Wanita stood frozen, torn between two worlds. The life she had built, the protection she had promised, and the truth that had finally broken through. Her eyes locked with Michael's. The years of love, of pain, of history. All of it swirled between them in silence. Then, without a word, she stepped back from the stroller. Michael's heart thundered. The boys squealed happily, unaware of the storm, still clutching their crackers, still pointing at airplanes outside. And for the first time in years, Michael felt something shift. Hope. Fragile, dangerous, but alive. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. The boarding gate closed behind them. The plane departed without Wanita and the twins on board. For Michael, it felt as though fate had offered him an extension. A rare second chance he hadn't dared to imagine minutes ago. They moved to a quieter corner of the terminal, away from the rush of boarding calls and rolling suitcases. Wanita lifted the twins from the stroller, each boy grabbing for her hand before their eyes darted to Michael, curious and cautious. For a moment, he didn't know what to do with his hands. The same hands that had held championship trophies, the same hands that had silenced roaring arenas, now hovered uselessly in the air, aching to hold something far more fragile. The louder twin broke the silence first. Mister, are you coming with us now? Michael's lips curved into a trembling smile. If your mom says it's okay. Wanita glanced at him, her expression unreadable. But she didn't stop the boys as they inched closer. The quieter one tilted his head, studying Michael the way he had before, like he was solving a puzzle. You look like me, he whispered. The words cracked Michael wide open. His throat tightened, his eyes stung. He crouched down slowly so he was at their level. Maybe that's because we're family, he said softly, the words carrying more truth than he had ever spoken. The louder boy giggled. Does that mean you're our uncle? Michael laughed. Really laughed. For the first time that day. A sound that startled even him with how much it carried. Something like that, he said, though the truth weighed heavier and sweeter than he could explain. Wanita watched silently, her arms crossed, her face torn between wariness and something softer. She had seen Michael with the world. She had seen Michael with teammates, with fans, with cameras. But this was different. She saw the man stripped of performance, stripped of ego. Just a father, desperate and broken, trying to find his way back. The twins quickly accepted him in their innocent way, tugging at his sleeves, showing him their toys. The airplane was brought out again, and soon Michael found himself on the floor of O'Hare International Airport, making buzzing noises with his lips, flying the toy through the air as two boys laughed so hard they fell over. Travelers passing by stopped, some pulling out phones, whispering in disbelief. The greatest basketball player in history, sitting cross-legged on the floor of a terminal, playing make-believe airplanes with two children who looked suspiciously like him. But Michael didn't care. For once, he didn't hear the whispers, didn't notice the cameras. The only sound that mattered was the laughter of the twins. When the game quieted, one of them leaned into his lap, resting his small head against Michael's chest. The boy's tiny heartbeat pulsed against his ribs, and Michael closed his eyes. He had carried trophies. He had lifted banners, but never had his arms felt so full. The quieter twin looked up at him suddenly. Do you like stories? Michael nodded, smiling. Yeah, I love stories. The boy grinned. Mommy tells us stories about Daddy. She says he was fast and strong, that he could fly. Michael's breath caught. He looked at Wanita, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Then he looked back at the boy. She was right, he said softly. Your daddy could fly. The boy beamed, proud and content. He didn't realize the double weight of Michael's words, that he was speaking not only of the man Wanita had described, but of himself, of the very blood that ran in their veins. For the first time in years, Michael felt whole and broken all at once. Whole because they were here within reach. Broken because of the years he could never reclaim. But as he sat on that cold airport floor, his arms around the sons he had only just begun to know, Michael Jordan made himself a silent promise. He would not waste another second. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. The airport around them moved on. Flights departed. Strangers hurried past. Announcements echoed above. But in that small corner of the terminal, time slowed. For Michael, it was as if the world had folded inward, leaving only the three of them, and Wanita watching silently from the side. The louder twin tugged at Michael's sleeve again. Hey, mister, can you spin a basketball on your finger? Like on TV? Michael froze. His chest tightened. He hadn't told them anything, hadn't revealed who he was. But the way the boy said it, innocent, curious, like he'd seen a shadow of a legend without knowing the man, nearly unraveled him. Michael smiled faintly, crouching lower. Maybe, he said softly. Do you have a ball? The boy pouted. No. Mommy says we can't bring toys that big on trips. Michael chuckled. She's right about that. He raised his finger and pretended to spin a ball anyway, his wrist flicking, his finger steady. The boys gasped, eyes wide as though they could see the invisible ball hovering there. Whoa! The louder one squealed, clapping. You're really good at pretending. Michael laughed, though the sound cracked with emotion. If only they knew. If only they understood that what they thought was make-believe had once been his reality. The very thing that had stolen him from them before they ever knew him. The quieter twin, still leaning against him, lifted his head slowly. His dark eyes, so steady, so searching, locked with Michael's. You remind me of Daddy, he said again, voice firmer this time. Michael swallowed hard. And what do you think Daddy was like? The boy thought for a moment, his small face wrinkling in concentration. Mommy says he was brave, that he always tried even when it was hard, that he loved us, even if he couldn't be here. The words hit Michael like a blow. He glanced at Wanita. Her eyes glistened, but she held his gaze. She hadn't told them lies. She hadn't painted him as a villain. She had given them a version of him worth admiring, worth holding on to. Michael bent closer, whispering so only the boys could hear. Your mommy was right. Your daddy did love you. More than anything. And now he's here. The louder twin tilted his head. Here? Where? Michael's eyes burned. He forced a smile. Closer than you think. The boys accepted the answer in the way only children can, without overthinking, without pressing, content with mystery. They leaned into him again, their small hands gripping his shirt, their laughter bubbling back as the toy airplane took flight once more. Wanita shifted nearby, her arms still crossed, but her face softened as she watched. She had feared this moment for so long, feared what would happen if the truth came crashing down. But seeing Michael there, kneeling on the floor, making airplane sounds with the twins, she saw something she hadn't in years. She saw the man she once believed in. Michael finally stood, scooping one twin up into his arms, then the other. They squealed with delight, tiny arms wrapping around his neck. The weight of them nearly buckled him, not because they were heavy, but because they were his. Flesh of his flesh, blood of his blood, proof that love, no matter how broken, leaves behind echoes that cannot be erased. The twins giggled in his arms. You're strong, one shouted. Like Daddy, the other added. Michael's throat closed. He pressed his lips to their hair, breathing in the scent of innocence, of beginnings. Yeah, he whispered. Like Daddy. And in that moment, Michael Jordan, the man who had conquered courts, silenced arenas, and carried the weight of greatness, felt the smallest hands on his shoulders and realized he had finally found the only title that mattered. Daddy. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. Wanita's that night, long after the airport crowd had thinned and the twins had fallen asleep against her shoulders, Wanita found herself sitting in a quiet hotel room. The curtains were half drawn, the muted glow of city lights painting the room in soft gold and shadow. Michael was not there. He had left them at the hotel door, promising he would return in the morning. But his presence lingered, heavier than the silence. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching the twins breathe peacefully, their small chests rising and falling, their curls damp from the day's chaos. They looked so safe, so untouched by the storm that churned inside her. Wanita buried her face in her hands. For years she had carried this secret alone. She had convinced herself it was for the best, that keeping Michael at a distance, shielding the boys from his world, was the only way to protect them. But now, after seeing him kneel on the cold airport floor, after hearing the tremor in his voice when he whispered family, her certainty had begun to crack. She remembered their history too well. The early years when love had been young and wild, when she believed in his dreams as much as he did. She had stood by his side through the grind, the practices, the sacrifices. But fame had grown faster than their love could keep up with. Suddenly, the man she had married belonged to the world. Every headline, every camera, every arena demanded pieces of him, until there was nothing left for her. She had begged him once, quietly, desperately, to choose her, to choose home. But Michael was built differently. His hunger was not just for victory, but for immortality. And in chasing that, he had left her behind. The night she realized she was carrying twins, she had sat alone in the dark, one hand pressed to her stomach, tears streaming down her face. She should have called him. She should have let him know. But anger, fear, and pride twisted together inside her. He won't be here. He won't change. And my children will not grow up waiting at the door for a father who never comes. So she chose silence. And yet, seeing him with them now, her heart betrayed her. The way he had crouched down, the way his voice shook when he spoke to them, the way the boys had leaned against him as if by instinct, those were not the actions of a man who didn't care. But could she trust it? Could she trust him? The world knew Michael Jordan as a legend, an unstoppable force, a man who could carry entire teams, entire cities on his back. But she knew him as a man, flawed, stubborn, consumed by his own greatness. He had broken her heart once. Could she risk him breaking the hearts of two little boys who had never known disappointment? She turned, staring at their faces, so peaceful in sleep. They deserved truth. They deserved love. But did they deserve the chaos that came with it? The cameras, the scrutiny, the endless comparisons, the heavy shadow of a father who was more myth than man? Wanita exhaled shakily, pressing a hand to her chest. She wanted to believe him when he said he was different. She wanted to believe the man who whispered promises at the gate was not the same man who had missed birthdays and anniversaries without notice. But belief was dangerous, and hope, she knew too well, could destroy. The stare between them held longer than either could bear. The knock came just after midnight. Wanita, half asleep in the armchair by the window, stiffened at the sound. For a moment she considered ignoring it. But the twins were asleep, and she didn't want them startled awake. She rose quietly, padded across the carpet, and opened the door. Michael stood there, hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes heavy not with fame, but with something deeper, regret, hope, and fear woven together. "I couldn't sleep," he said softly. "Can we talk?" She hesitated. Part of her wanted to slam the door, to protect the fragile quiet she had built for herself and her boys. But another part, the part that remembered the man he had once been, stepped aside. He entered silently, glancing toward the twins asleep in bed. The sight of them seemed to soften him instantly. His shoulders dropped, his voice hushed. "They're beautiful," he whispered, almost reverently. Wanita crossed her arms, standing at a distance. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them." Michael turned, meeting her eyes. "I've never meant anything more." The tension between them thickened. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the air conditioner filled the room, a steady reminder of time passing. Finally, Wanita broke the silence. "Do you understand why I didn't tell you?" Michael swallowed, his jaw tightening. "I'm trying to, but all I can think about are the years I missed. Their first words, their first steps, their first everything. You stole that from me." Her eyes flashed. "Stole? Michael, you gave it away. You chose the game, the fame, the road. You think I wanted to do this alone? I begged you to be here, and every time you chose the court instead of us." The words cut deep. He winced but didn't look away. "You're right. I failed you. I failed us. But I didn't even get the chance to fail them." His voice cracked, raw with pain. "And they're the only thing I want now." Wanita's breath hitched. She wanted to believe him, but her heart was scarred. "And what happens when the cameras come back? When the season starts, when the endorsements call, when the world puts you back on that pedestal? Do you walk away from them the way you walked away from me?" Michael stepped closer, his voice steady but trembling with emotion. "No, not this time. I've had everything the world can give me. Rings, trophies, money, fame, you name it. But when I saw them today, I realized none of it matters if I'm not their father. I can't get those lost years back, but I won't lose another day. Not one." Wanita shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "You say that now, but I've lived this before. I've watched you promise one thing and chase another. I won't let you break their hearts the way you broke mine." Michael's chest rose and fell sharply. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Wanita, you think I don't live with that guilt every day? You think I don't wake up in the middle of the night haunted by what I lost with you? That's why I can't let this slip away. Please, let me prove it. Not to you, not even to me, but to them." Wanita's defenses cracked. Her lips trembled. Her arms wrapped around herself as though holding her own heart together. "They're my whole world, Michael. Everything I've done for them. If I let you in and you leave, if you hurt them, I don't know if I could forgive you. And I don't know if they could either." Michael's voice softened, steady as a vow. "Then I won't leave. Not this time. I don't want to be Michael Jordan, the legend, with them. I just want to be daddy." The word hung between them, heavier than any trophy, more sacred than any championship banner. Wanita blinked rapidly, tears spilling down her cheeks. She wanted to resist, to push him away, to protect the life she had built. But when she looked at him, She didn't see the man who had once left her for the game. She saw a father desperate to reclaim what he had lost. She turned away, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. "I don't know if I can trust you." Michael stepped closer, his voice breaking now. "Then don't trust me yet. Just give me the chance to earn it. For them." Wanita stood there, trembling, the weight of years pressing down on her. At last, she nodded faintly, barely more than a whisper. "One chance, Michael. That's all." Michael closed his eyes, exhaling a breath that seemed to carry years of regret and hope all at once. "One chance is all I need." And for the first time in a long, long time, hope flickered between them. Not the reckless fire of young love, but a fragile flame, tested by pain, yet unwilling to die. Morning light crept into Chicago, painting the skyline in shades of soft amber. For most people, it was just another day. But for Michael Jordan, standing outside a hotel room door with 2 cups of coffee in hand, it felt like stepping into a game without knowing the rules. His palms were damp, not from the steam but from nerves. The man who had once thrived under the roar of 20,000 fans now found himself afraid of what lay behind a single door. He knocked softly. The door cracked open, and there stood Wanita. Her hair was pulled back loosely, strands escaping around her face. She looked tired, years of worry had etched quiet lines into her eyes. But there was a steeliness there too, a strength Michael had always known but never respected enough. "Peace offering," he said, holding out the coffee. She raised an eyebrow, suspicious, but after a beat she took it. "We'll see if it works." And then it happened. Behind her, laughter spilled into the hallway. The twins were bouncing on the bed, pillows in midair. At first they didn't notice him, but then one of them froze, eyes wide, before bursting into a grin. "Mister!" the louder one shouted, leaping off the bed. His small feet pattered across the carpet as he launched himself into Michael's arms. The other twin followed, quieter but no less determined, wrapping his little arms around Michael's leg. Michael's chest tightened. He sank to his knees, gathering both boys against him. For a man who had held championship trophies, Olympic gold, and the weight of a city's dreams, nothing had ever felt this heavy or this right. "You came back," the louder twin said simply, eyes shining. Michael swallowed hard, blinking away the sting behind his eyes. Those 3 words, "you came back," were ones he had failed too many people with. He had broken promises before, let down those who had trusted him most. But right now, kneeling on the hotel carpet, he silently swore these words would never be untrue again. "Of course I came back," he whispered. "Where else would I be?" Wanita stood by the doorway, coffee in hand, her expression unreadable. She wasn't smiling, but something in her eyes flickered. Surprise, maybe even something softer, but it was gone before Michael could catch it. The twins tugged at him, demanding plans. "What are we doing today?" one asked. "Can we get pancakes?" "And cartoons," the other chimed in. Michael chuckled, looking up at Wanita with a half-smile. "Well, that sounds like a championship schedule." At the diner, the chaos began. The boys insisted on sitting in the booth with him, pressed against his sides. They squabbled over sprinkles, demanded more syrup, and asked Michael to cut pancakes into shapes he had no idea how to make. "Basketball shape," one shouted. Michael tried, sawing awkwardly with his knife, ending up with a lopsided circle. The boys roared with laughter, syrup smeared across their faces. Michael laughed too, wiping their cheeks gently with napkins. From across the table, Wanita watched silently. She had seen him in arenas signing autographs, dazzling cameras with easy charm. But this was different. He wasn't playing to a crowd. He was just being. After breakfast, the twins dragged him to the park. Michael pushed them on swings, his long arms stretching awkwardly, but the boys screamed with joy, "Higher, mister! Higher!" Their laughter echoed, a sound purer than any applause he had ever heard. The quieter twin tugged at his sleeve. "Mommy says you were fast. Can you still run?" Michael grinned. "Want to test me?" Minutes later, they were lined up for a race. Michael crouched down, the boys bouncing beside him. At Wanita's reluctant go, the twins took off, legs pumping. Michael jogged slowly, letting one surge ahead. He stumbled theatrically just before the finish, collapsing in mock exhaustion. "You beat me," he groaned, sprawled on the grass. The boys erupted into laughter, piling on top of him, crowing about their victory. For Michael, lying in the grass with his sons climbing over him, it was the sweetest loss he'd ever known. But then, as the afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the park as the twins tugged on Michael's hands, dragging him toward a corner ice cream shop, their small fingers wrapped around his, sticky with grass and sweat, as though they had always belonged there. For Michael, each step felt surreal, like walking into a life he had missed but somehow been given back for one fragile day. Inside the shop, the cool air smelled of sugar and chocolate. The twins pressed their noses against the glass case, their voices rising with excitement. "Sprinkles!" the louder one shouted. "No, chocolate syrup!" the quieter one argued, pointing insistently. Michael crouched between them. "How about both? Champions deserve the full package." Their eyes widened, thrilled by the idea. He ordered cones stacked high, adding a simple vanilla one for Wanita. When he handed it to her outside, she froze, surprise flickering in her expression. "You remembered my favorite," she murmured. Michael shrugged lightly. Some things don't fade. They sat together on the curb, the twins dripping ice cream down their shirts as they giggled uncontrollably. Michael made a big show of horror. "Oh no, this is a disaster. Ice cream emergency." He cupped his hands around his mouth, making siren noises. "Woo-woo. Somebody call the ice cream police." The boys collapsed in laughter, rolling on the pavement, while Wanita, against her will, smiled too. She quickly hid it behind her cone, but Michael saw it. And for a brief moment he felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. Later, back at the hotel, the twins were reluctant to let the day end. They clung to him, bouncing on the bed. "Just one story," the louder one begged. "Two stories," the quieter one added, grinning mischievously. Wanita crossed her arms, her voice sharp but not unkind. "Boys." Michael raised his hand gently. "One story." He sat down at the edge of the bed. The boys crawled to his side, their eyes wide, waiting. He drew a breath, letting his voice drop into the rhythm of memory. "Once upon a time, there was a boy who loved basketball more than anything. But one day his coach told him he wasn't good enough. That boy cried in his room night after night, but he didn't stop trying. He worked harder every single day. And one day, he learned that if you believe enough, you can fly." The quieter twin leaned into his chest, eyelids heavy. "Like Superman?" he whispered. Michael smiled faintly. "Maybe not like Superman, but close." The louder twin yawned, snuggling against his arm. Within minutes, both were asleep, their breathing soft and even. Michael sat still, his large frame hunched protectively around them. His chest rose and fell with a weight he hadn't felt before. A weight that had nothing to do with pressure and everything to do with love. He brushed a hand over their curls, his voice a whisper meant only for them. "I'll never miss another story. Not again." Finally, he stood, easing himself off the bed. In the hallway, Wanita waited. She had been listening, her arms folded, her expression tight. But her eyes betrayed her. "You surprised me today," she admitted quietly. Michael searched her face. "In a good way?" Her lips trembled with hesitation, but at last she nodded. "In a way I didn't think was possible anymore." He didn't smile, not fully. He only nodded, holding her gaze, letting the silence stretch. For once, he didn't try to charm her, didn't try to force belief. He simply let the truth of the day speak for itself. Wanita turned away, but not before he saw it, the faintest crack in her armor. And though fragile, it was enough, because for the first time in years, she was no longer looking at him as a man who had failed her. She was seeing the possibility, just the possibility, that he might not fail them.